There's so much. Last few years, great work was going on around diversity, equity, inclusion. This year, it's taking a little bit of a hit, and everybody's talking about it, like how funding is not there. What is your take on all of this?
A lot of this is coming from a place of not understanding what DEI is, not understanding other people and their experiences, not having the curiosity and the empathy to try to understand. That's why I said it's gotten very polarizing politically. And so there's a whole lot of debate. There's not a whole lot of dialogue around it. And I think there are some very vocal voices that have platforms and people that listen to them without having the critical thinking behind of where is this coming from? What does this mean? What is it that we all want? But it's very reductive thinking, right? It's the throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've been doing this work for the entirety of my career.
Hey, it's Deepa, and today's guest on Recipes for Life is Karen Jaw-Madson. She's the principal of co-design of work experience, author of Culture Your Culture, Innovating Experiences at Work, founder of Future of Work platform, a new HR, and instructor at Stanford University's Continuing Studies program. She enables decision makers to address organizational challenges that affect performance, business performance, including leadership, company culture, talent optimization, and change management. She's been featured in Inc., Fast Company, Fortune, Thrive Global, Protocol, and The Ladders, as well as written various HR publications. Karen has a BA in Ethnic and Cultural Studies from Bryn Mawr College and an MA in Social Organizational Psychology from Columbia University. I want to start off by saying that Karen is one of the few people that I've met who truly embodies an abundance mindset. She is one of the greatest connectors of people and resources. She shares 3 super capabilities for leaders that are important for driving change: success, strategic follow-through, change leadership, and partnership. Her ideas on integrating business goals with cultural goals and emotional intelligence, aiming to create meaningful and sustainable change within organizations, are a must listen. One of the tools that she focuses on is positive framing and generative questions, which is derived from Appreciative Inquiry. Without further ado, I give you Karen Jaw-Madson. Karen, I am so excited you're here, you're joining us. I can't tell you how happy I am. So let me ask you this. I don't think I've ever asked you this. What do you do for fun?
What? I meet up with my friend Deepa.
You don't meet me enough times, so the rest of the time, what do you do?
I just love spending time with my family and my friends, honestly. Like, I don't need a lot of activity. In fact, I probably need less because I work too much. So for me, it's just spending quality time with people I enjoy and who I love. So honestly, when I said meet up with Deepa, I wasn't trying to be facetious. I mean, that really is part of it too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy our time together too. And I'm so looking forward to when you come down here to Carpentaria. We'll talk more at the end of the show because that's like a super fun thing for our guests,
Great.
Viewers. Yeah, sorry, not guests, but viewers. So listen, this is like a fun question, another fun question for you. If you had all the time and money in the world, what would you like to do the most?
It's so hard. There's so many things. Okay. So honestly, I would focus on learning more so I could add more value. And that really comes with time. So my whole thing is what good work can be done through me. And so if I had all the time and money in the world, is to be able to do that to a greater degree and as a great of a degree as I could. I certainly want to support great causes that ensure sustainable progress. But for me, I have big aspirations and thoughts for the world, but at the same time, I also know that affecting the world around us, just our immediate vicinity, is also really important too. So I don't ever expect to have all the time and money in the world, so I probably need to think about that question a bit more. But that's really what it's like. How do I enhance my ability to do more good?
You are so true to your temperament since when I've known you, Karen, because that speaks so much to service, that like impacting people, helping people. That's what I'm hearing you say, which is great. So I wish for you to have more time and money in the world for sure. So before we actually get into like how awesome you are and what you bring to the workspace, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
So I'm an organizational psychologist by training. My career, my early to mid career was spent mostly in corporate space in the multinational setting. And I've always been in roles where I felt like I could make a difference. You see a theme here. So that's my background. Now, about 11 years ago, I decided to make a big change in my life, and I decided to pursue this portfolio career, which is made up of a lot of different hats, primarily executive coaching and consulting, but I also research, write, teach, I do public speaking, do some advising. So there's a little bit of everything in there. I love the variety of the work. If you ask me where I spend most of my time when it comes to just my core, it's coaching and developing leadership in their teams, helping organizations leverage their culture, their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and employee experience. The third is really aligning people with strategy for results. That's talent optimization. And then the fourth is really cutting across everything else, but is a lot of work in itself, is change management and transformation. So that's where I spend most of my time.
Gosh, I have so many questions for you. But before we do that, what made you pivot your career 11 years ago? Like, did something happen? Did something change? Like, why that shift?
So there's a lot of factors that led to it. Certainly I was working at a unsustainable pace. So I was in a global role, working from 5 a.m. till midnight because, you have Europe and Asia working at very different times, and I was available for all of it. I had a lot of soul searching about having moved up the ladder and gotten very close to what I was aiming for and realizing I didn't want it after all. So I had to do a lot of soul searching. What I found as I got more senior in the organization was that there was more of what I didn't like and less of what I did like to do. So again, those raised questions for me about what's the implication? What does this mean? Because it's so easy to commit to something. Oh, it's too late. I've already done it. I can't change my course. I think I was really lucky and blessed to be able to suffer hard enough to ask those questions and realize that I needed to take a different path. So it probably took me about a year to question and a year to decide when to move, make my move.
So clearly, everything that you went through, you sort of, didn't stay static on it and didn't say, well, this is the situation I'm in, I'm just going to go through it. You had enough self-awareness from where I can, objectively see it to say something's wrong, it's not working, I'm unhappy, I need to make a change. And for you, that change came about as a way of saying, I can't do this anymore, I need to do something different. So you didn't go find another job, you went on to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think the question at that time was, what does this mean? So rather than go straight from, okay, this isn't going to work, I'm going to switch to the next job, which is what I think we are trained to do. I really took the time to explore, what does this mean? What is it going to take? So there were things that kind of needed to percolate for a little while, which is why I said it took me the time it did to make that shift. But I'm glad I did it. I mean, this is the job I've stayed in the longest.
So that really tells you something, right?
Yes. And I joke all the time with people, I really love my boss.
Because she's fabulous. I love your boss too, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
So looking back at the 11 years and the work that you've done, and one of the most common things or the things that you're consistently doing that you've said is coaching, like just broadly.
Yeah, I actually focus on leadership coaching. There's a lot of different kinds of coaching out there. a lot of different needs. I think it's really important to make sure when someone's going out to get a coach, that they find the right coach for them, and that I'm the right coach for somebody else. So my focus is on helping people to become better leaders.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because my next question is a great segue. Let's just say I'm a leader managing a team of people, and I'm kind of considering taking on like a higher position, and I'm thinking of a leadership or executive coach, right? Or like I have a team member and I'm saying, oh my God, this person is doing really well. And I see them as somebody that can take on more responsibility and do people management. What is, like, if I was thinking like that and I approached you, like, what are some of the most common reasons that people would approach you for coaching? Like if I came to you and say, I want to do this, how can you help me figure out what is it that my person might need?
Yeah, I mean, that's what coaching is good for. It's different than asking for advice. It's more about, can somebody help me explore and think through as I figure out my right path forward? So when they come and work with me, they might not know what they need to do. So part of that coaching is to figure that out. Find out what those priorities might be, identify what the gap is between where somebody is and where they want to be, the capabilities they need to develop in order to get there. Those are all things that I can help them with. The biggest thing is that they're open and willing to take that journey, right? So some people might understand in their head that they need to do things, but if they're not committed to doing it, I'm not as effective as a coach, right? So I think it's really important that people commit to taking advantage, if they're able to work with a coach, because it is such an effective intervention that, it's just been proven to be the best source of not only development, but getting a safe space to get that support. As you get more senior, it's a little bit more lonely, and having that sounding board is really, really critical to helping somebody become more effective as a leader.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Now, let me ask you this hypothetically. Let's say my boss sent me to you and said, Deepa, Karen's amazing. You need to go talk to her. I'm going to invest in you, and we're going to do some leadership and executive coaching because you've done really well. And there's this manager position. That means you're going to manage a team, and I want you to go to see Karen. And I'm like, I'm really good at my job. Why do I need to see Karen? But guess what? I'll go because my boss is asking me to go. I come to you and say, Karen, what can you help me with? I'm really good at what I do. So what would you say to me? What are some of the questions that you'll ask me?
I'll ask about aspirations. I don't go into, even if somebody was told they have to work with me, I always give them an out. Because for me, it's important that they find the right person for them. And if it's not me, I have lots of other colleagues I can refer you to. So I never want people to feel like they're made to do it. I would just ask you, what are you aspiring for in your career? Are you where you want to be? And if that's the case, great. But then you have to have a conversation with your manager here, because there's a little bit of a misalignment, right, about your future. If it's something different and there is some distance between where you are and where you want to be, that's a starting point for our exploration. A lot of what I do at the outset is really about developing emotional intelligence, because that's 60% of somebody's success in the role, regardless of title or level. And so making sure they have that self and social awareness so that they can self-manage and manage the relationships around them. Those are really 4 key skill sets that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time developing.
Okay, fair. What if I kind of pivoted a little bit and I said, I think I kind of have an idea why I need to sort of come and see you, but I'm sort of unclear because I do want to get that manager position, but I'm unsure. So then we would be in an exploration stage.
It would be. And there are coaches that in session 1, they would want you to nail down your goals for the work. And for me, I actually leave a few sessions in the front end to really do a bit more exploring, because it's not always what we think it is.
Okay.
So
can you give me an example of that? Like, have you had in your previous many years of coaching where you've had that similar experience? Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So I had somebody that came to me once saying they were told they needed coaching because of their communication skills. That's very common, right? A
Mm.
lot of people are told that. But this is somebody I'd known previously. So I kind of was like, well, that's curious. I've known you for a while. I haven't seen any issues around communication. Can you tell me what that means? So um, through the course of exploring the situation that they were in, and so for me, it's very much driven by the context and the place where they are. So I'm not there to say, here, you have to do this. It's understanding the person, the unique person in that unique context first to figure out, again, how to become more effective, right? And so when he said that, I said, that it just sparked my curiosity. And through the course of exploring that with him, it turned out that if I had started and said, great, let's just dig right into making you a better communicator, right? It would have helped the situation, but it wouldn't have really pinpointed the root of the issue, which turned out to be an issue around conflict. So he had relationship issues around him. And rather than tell him that he was pissing off his colleagues, they said, you need help on your communications. You see how that happens? And so had I gone straight into communication, it might have improved things, but it wouldn't have gotten to the root of the issue. So that's why it's really important to figure it out, making sure. The other thing is I do encourage the development of goals because then you have a target you're aiming for. You're more likely to achieve something. And I don't want it to be an administrative exercise. I want it to be genuinely meaningful so that the person's excited and just a little bit scared even to work on it. So
Yeah.
that's another reason.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Thank you. So, wow, if you'd just gone with communication, like you said, I'm sure it would have gotten a little better, but you really would not have been able to help him address the real core of the issue, which was conflict. Can you speak a little bit about what the conflict was about? Maybe necessarily not this, but in general, like generalizing, what are some of the things that leaders see in terms of, or people who'd like to manage see in terms of dealing with conflict or their lack of wanting to deal with conflict?
I think we all know that when we avoid something, it's out of self-preservation and fear. One of my favorite definitions of conflict is a mismanaged agreement.
Ah, okay.
So the conflict comes from having a mismanaged agreement. So I thought one thing, you thought another thing, turned out to be something else, and we got to figure it out. So conflict may not necessarily be a bad thing, but because we are shaped by our experiences and perhaps we've had some bad experiences with conflict, this is what might create that fear of not wanting to address it. And we know what happens with avoidance, right? It just builds up and then it blows up later on. So that's really where that comes from. So conflict in and of itself should just be a signal that something needs to be explored and addressed. Okay, so I
And
want people to remove their fear around that.
right, but that also means that people need to have enough self-awareness to understand that they're avoiding this situation and they don't want to talk about it because there's conflict there and they're doing more self-preservation mode. Right?
Well, sometimes you don't get the choice. Sometimes it just hits you in the face, right? I've had that situation myself, right? I mean, you and I have an example in our heads potentially, right? But it's like you don't know somebody is thinking these things and all of a sudden it blows up one day and it comes from left field. So sometimes it's just really important to be able to. One of the things I really emphasize with leaders is to pay attention, just observe, because they miss the signals along the way, right?
Yeah. So in this person's case situation, so clearly it could have been that the leader definitely missed some signals. This person did not get the constructive feedback that they could have gotten. They themselves did not have a blowout. It was many small, tiny things, and then that brought them in front of you with a communication problem.
Yeah, and it's great that he was sent to me, and that we did uncover it because you know how career limiting it can be, and people have no idea why. So it really can make, and it affects reputations as well as not So it can be so pervasive if it's not confronted. So I think we're all intuitive enough to know when something's not quite right. It just takes that extra step to ask the question and try to figure that out.
Right, but I think the key is to like really listen to ourselves when we know something's not right. A lot of people tend to like, not maybe a lot of people, at least few people tend to be like, I don't want to deal with it. It'll all take care of itself, right? But then it really doesn't unless you address it. But what are some of the things that people can do to work through this mismanaged agreement? Like some like a recipe for someone that says, oh, I have something's really wrong here, I know there's a bit of conflict, it's making me uncomfortable, I really need to address it. How does one address it?
So there's a few things. First of all, and this addresses the question you said previously about fear, is you got to take the judgment out of it. This is right or wrong, good or bad. That puts us in the state of fight or flight, right? And then we don't have access to the executive level functions of our brain where we can use our experience and our talents to try to figure it out, right? So that's the first and foremost, because if you're coming in judging, I'm right, they're wrong, I got to force, then you're not setting the conditions for resolving that conflict. What you want to aim for is dialogue. So and let me differentiate dialogue by defining what it's not. So in a debate, for example, everyone's coming in with their own agenda and they're trying to force everybody into one version of the truth. Okay. And in a discussion, it might be everyone sharing something, but there's a lot more telling than asking. In the dialogue, we're only all coming in with our pieces of it, and we got to figure out how to bring it together to get to that answer. And so the way you do that, the technique I'm going to talk to you about is positive framing and generative questions. Those two skill sets come from a practice called Conversations Worth Having, which comes from Appreciative Inquiry. And that positive framing, the whole point of positive framing is to redirect our attention and energy more toward what we want more of and where we want to go. Because we're trained to be problem solvers. What's wrong with this? That's the deficit problem-focused mindset, which when we try to address our list of problems, we end up kind of creating new problems and we're never finished. So what is it that we need to focus on so that everyone's going in the right direction together, right? So the way we drive that is the positive framing comes from just taking the opposite of what you're trying to deal with, right? So people aren't getting along. Let's flip it. People are getting along, and this is the result of it. Well, then the generative questions to drive this, how might we create a situation where everyone gets along, right? Or recall a time where we all got along. What were the conditions in place and how can we get there again? So there's those kinds of questions where you're working with you're collaborating on getting to where everybody wants to go. So that's a really high level view of that, but I highly recommend Conversations Worth Having as a resource.
Okay. And then can you give me a couple of examples of what would be and I'm assuming this would be the setting between you and your coachee, like, right? And then you would be having this sort of like, you'd want to sort of talk about this tool and implement because you think this tool right now in this moment would be the right one for him. What would be like some of the questions that you would ask when it came to positive framing, like for them to sort of like, get into that space of, oh, this is how I need to like reframe it or think about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do nothing but ask generative questions as a coach, right? Because I'm not here, I tell people, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help you be more effective. And so the way we do that is we have to ask a lot of questions. We have to explore. We have to learn. So by the time I get to saying, okay, have you thought or considered this particular practice or tool, they've already experienced it with me. Like I've already been asking them generative questions the whole time.
So you modeled it for them. Okay.
In a lot of respects, yeah, because a coach can't work on their own. They have to partner with those they're coaching, right? And so they've already experienced it. The leap between that and the other argument I tend to make is, what's the pattern you're trying to break? Because sometimes it's spinning their wheels over and over again. The same thing happens. And the analogy I say is, look, you want to break a pattern, it starts with you, because we're all in it together. And so when you have a different response, that compels others to respond differently as well. So that's how you break patterns. Well, what's it going to take to be able to break that pattern?
Yeah.
I don't
And
know the answer. I want them to, work it through with me,
right. So, I think part of coaching is that you're not, like you said, you're not consulting, mentoring, you're coaching, which is slightly different, or advising, right? So the answers have to come from the person that is the coachee, and they have the process is for them to be able to figure it out with you and be a collaborative partner with you. So when you ask the questions, open-ended generative questions, the idea is that they have to like really start thinking, and which goes to your original point of saying they need to be invested in this process.
Yeah. I come right out and say, here's what it's like to coach with me. Will this work for you? Because if you need something different, I'm happy to connect you to somebody else. And with me, they have to expect that I'm always going to constantly be balancing that sense of connection and safety in this safe space to explore. But I'm here to also stretch and challenge them. And I'm constantly calibrating that. So another book recommendation, I actually took, if I were to sum up my coaching style, it comes from the title of this book, which is Executive Coaching with Backbone and Heart. That's exactly what I'm doing all the time. And there might be times I need to challenge because that person needs to take it's one thing to evolve as a leader, but sometimes you need to take some really big steps and you have to build up the courage to do that. So another book that just came out was Leadership Revolution. They talk about the big leap. What is that big leap the person has to take in order to really escalate their leadership? Yeah, you can evolve as a leader without a coach. You will evolve. But if you want to get there faster and you want to make progress, that you got to be willing to take that leap with them.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I want to just sort of circle back to me coming to you as coachee, and we've gone through an initial process of like kind of getting to know each other. You got to know a little bit of my situation, and we've discovered that one of the problems, quote unquote, or things that I need to work on is that I am let's say I'm not fully aware of the interpersonal dynamics between some of my team members, and a couple of people annoy me. So instead of like really addressing it, I avoid it. Right? So I'm like, oh my God, I'll just send them some nonsense passive aggressive email because I'm the boss and I'm just going to do it this way. And then the manager, you've realized like this is not clearly the right way to address a situation. So I'm like, well, Karen, you need to help me. What are some of the questions that you would ask me that I can sort of start thinking about it myself? Now I'm clearly aware there's a bit of a problem that I need to work on.
Yeah. And I think people's tendency are to say, okay, what are the solutions? How do we how are we trying to fix this? Right. And I think the step before that is really about what are the implications of this? So because of these issues, what is this creating? Or if you don't address it, what's going to happen?
So you're saying, right, that the questions, some of the initial pre-questions that you'll really ask me is like, so I can get some self-awareness as to what my behavior, the impact that it's having on others.
Potentially. I mean, it is to get to the root cause of things, but at the same time, I want to dig deeper than, oh, those two people aren't getting along. I just got to fix it. I have to make it so that they shake hands and hug at the end of the day or something like that.
Right. That won't resolve it. Right.
That won't resolve it. Right. So where is this coming from? What does it mean? How's it showing up? How would you like it differently? How do we get them there? Those are the kinds of questions. It's just, and it doesn't need to take a lot of time, by the way. Having that empathy and curiosity to be able to dig beneath the surface. And I hear people like, oh, I'm too busy to do that. Doesn't take a lot of time. Yeah. It actually doesn't. It takes your attention. And that's why I say pay attention, because if you don't address it, could it get worse, right? Could you lose performance? Absolutely will. A lot of these issues are preventable. It's because people just didn't pay attention to the signals along the way. I say that about my culture work, by the way, too. Oh my gosh, we have some cultural issues because this big thing blew up. Well, you didn't pay attention enough to see where all the clues were pointing you toward, right?
Right. They didn't pay attention when it was a molehill, when it just was starting and somebody complained or somebody didn't feel right about it. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that part of the way to resolve this fundamentally is also to address the coachee that comes in and says, listen, do you also understand why you're feeling this way or behaving this way in this situation with this person? Before we actually find solutions, it's really important for you to understand this about yourself.
Right. Right. There's
And
certainly
then,
that
right?
importance.
And it could be that person could be just like somebody that is just annoys you, or just like, you're like triggered by this person. Or it could be that there's a real issue that happened like a couple of years ago that you never addressed.
And again, what's the implications of this? They know I hate them, or they don't feel safe to share with me when there's a problem until it blows up. Those are all implications of having that. And so, yeah, that's about what role do we play in the situations around us, and sometimes we're the source of the stress for other people. We always think we're the hero in our own stories, and we might be the villain. Right?
And I think part of that exploration process that you're talking about is also for them to understand, wait, am I now the villain in my own story? Like, am I the one creating? So it is possible, right? It is possible. And I think that brings about some level of transformation, which is good for that person and also the community.
Well, it's another quote I love, and I've said this before, but it's like we're perfectly designed for current results. So if you want things to be different, then you have to do different things. You have to try different things, right? And I think oftentimes you're talking about managers, because their role is to manage performance and the completion of work products. They tend to be a little bit more transactional in their relationships with people. And that's not to say, you know, rah, rah, we have to talk about our pets or our kids before every meeting. No, it's really about getting to know people. What are their needs? What are their motivations? Asking them, hey, we're working on this project. Deepa, what do you think? That's how you build deeper relationships. And I think a lot of managers tend to be transactional. Because work is so busy, you don't have time. Hey, Deepa, can you get me this by this date? Great.
Right.
Well, because of that, we have a good relationship because you get things to me on time. When I ask you to do it, you do what I say. That's a transactional relationship.
Right,
And you're
right,
never going
right.
to get to kind of that deeper, meaningful relationships that actually lead to greater results together as a team.
That also, I think the crux of the problem there also is like there's like lack of building of trust. Like there's no, people don't give it enough time that it needs to build trust. Oh my God, that's just like such a huge piece of not being able to work, cohesively, or be happy sometimes about where you're working or who you're working with, because people just don't take the time enough to be able to build that.
Yeah, it's really sad because it doesn't have to be that way, and it's totally fixable. You're talking about fixing things. You can improve these situations.
Totally, totally. All right, so Karen, last question on this. How to get the most value out of your coach?
Well, I think having really honest conversations and true collaboration with them is huge. Like having that commitment is really important. I mean, you have to prioritize your own development. So I've had people that said, oh, an emergency came up with a customer. I can't make it to our coaching session. And that thing gets resolved probably within a day, and they don't maybe need to be involved. Somebody else can do it. That shows that they're prioritizing other things. And, when you think about time management, in that book, 4,000 Weeks, why is it that we put off those things that are most important to us? And if
Yeah.
it's your development as a leader and you're prioritizing day-to-day issues, and I understand emergencies happen, but then if you don't reschedule, or if you forget to spend some time on your own development, because the hard work actually happens in between coaching sessions. It's not at the coaching session, right? And so I think for people to really fully commit themselves to that, it's funny, I was in the middle of a coaching session, and I think it was either the CEO or the COO was trying to message this person. I'm like, do you want to take that? Like, yeah. They're like, nope. I get 1 hour for this. This is my time. They can wait. And I was like, okay, you sure? They're like,
It's
yeah.
like, wait, this is your boss. But no, I think that goes to your point about saying part of the way to get the most out of your coach or your coaching session is to like really prioritize it, give it the time it needs, do some,
And it's not for the coach's sake. It's for your
yeah.
own sake.
Of course, right. But also, I think it's such a collaborative process. The more that they can give into it, the more that they can get out of that process.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
The less they give into it, they're not going to get much. And of course, it's not going to stick over a period of next few months.
Well, and that's what happens. Yeah. I mean, coaching is very effective, but I think what they've seen is a fall off when new habits are not formed. Then you don't sustain the progress that's made. Yeah.
Yeah. And you already gone on top of our list, but for like really coding 4,000 books, because that's that's the
4,000
book.
weeks?
4,000 weeks. I'm sorry, 4,000 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, Corey just gave me that book a few weeks ago and I'm reading it and it's just like really amazing.
Yeah. The title itself is just, yeah. It
Finite
wakes you up.
time. I think we have less than 4,000 weeks now. We have
Yes,
very
we're
less.
yes. If we're lucky, we have 2,000 weeks. Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. I'm going to have my existential crisis now. Thank you.
Well, we're in the same boat.
No, I'm just teasing.
But okay, all right. So
compass every day. We do.
I just read like I probably am 10 pages away from finishing it, and I just read something else, and I was like starstruck. Like in my kitchen this morning, I was like staring into space. I'm like, when he talks about that, sometimes we just so much focus on why this is so important or why success is important, why this is important, but in the vastness of the universe, really, it's nothing.
Yeah. No, you have to put perspective on everything. Yes.
Right. And then it just takes the pressure off of you, I think. Like you just do things for the sake of that it brings you joy as opposed to for the sake of success or that or this or whatever it is, right? That's kind of the epiphany I had in the morning.
Well, I mean, you and I have had exposure to ways in which we tend to self-sabotage, right? These are ways in which we torture ourselves. And by the way, this middle part of our lives is when we should be living at our best, because you can't say, I'll wait till retirement. We don't know what's ahead of us. And, having experienced elder care issues over the last few years, I really have an appreciation for kind of the end of life experience and the transitions that come with that. And it was just such a big reminder for me to stop torturing myself in my middle age, because this is a place and time that I can actually do what I intend to do.
Yes.
And get that choice later on,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and self-sabotage brings me to another question. And I don't know, in your experience, do you see this more often in women or men or across the board, like in terms of just the work context?
I think we're all human. I think it manifests in different ways. But the analogy I tend to share with people is leadership is not a switch. It's more like a dial. So all these aspects of leadership, you got to calibrate and figure out where on the dial you need to move. If it's too much, it's a problem. If it's too little, it's a problem. So what's your just right? And that takes a bit of work to figure out what that is. And that has to be based on your own sense of self, your values, the kind of the leader you want to be. All of those need to be the basis by which you figure out where that calibration happens. Because, by the way, leadership is not a job that's ever finished, right? It's something that you have to continually manage and maintain and calibrate. And because that never ends, it means you have lots of chances to figure it out and to learn from it and to move forward.
Yeah. What's your example of too much or too less? I'm just curious. In a leadership style.
The self-sabotage comes from our strengths that are really being overused. And that comes from the positive intelligence work, right? So I'll use myself as an example. I like to be useful and helpful to people. That's the pleaser in me. And the intent there is, if I am useful and helpful to you, that brings us closer together. I'm closer to you as a result of that because I'm useful and helpful to you. But what that creates are these uneven relationships where I'm always giving and somebody else is always taking. And instead of being closer to them, actually we're farther apart, right?
True.
Because I'm not getting my needs met. I used to be so proud of myself. Anytime I promise something to someone else, I will always do that before I get to my own work. Guess what? I never got to my own work and I always screwed myself over, right? That's self-sabotage. And it's this willingness or desire to make a difference and to be helpful to other people, to do good things in this world, and at my own expense. That's where that's too much, right? And then there's too little where, if we're so individualistic to the point where it's everyone for themselves, you see how much we lose, right? You see how much we lose by not caring for the person next to us. And you're seeing a lot of that in the political discourse today.
Right.
That's where that comes from, this really staunch individualism that's not helping everybody as a whole.
Right.
We lose that sense of community.
True. That's a great example. Karen, how did you know that part of your people pleasing was self-sabotaging? Like, how do you create that level of self-awareness? Like, what if I need to figure out how am I self-sabotaging myself, how do I go about doing that?
Well, and that's that pause I ask everybody to do. And it's not meant to overthink anything. It's just being able to be self-aware enough to say something just triggered in me and I got to understand where that came from. Right? Why am I not feeling great about that relationship? I think that's kind of where it comes from, that self-awareness. And then how do you adjust? That's a self-management piece. And being able to have that helps you really manage those relationships around you to make sure that they're healthy.
Yeah. And is this something that somebody can identify themselves, or do you feel like they need like either a good friend or a coach or someone to help them with it?
It's always great to have somebody else, but I don't think that precludes anyone from trying to explore these things on their own.
Themselves. Yeah.
And I tend to be on the introverted side. Sometimes I do have to process it and reflect upon it before I'm able to bring it or surface it to anybody else. So it's sometimes necessary.
Wait, do you describe yourself as an introvert?
Well, technically I'm a +1 extrovert.
What does that mean, +1 extrovert?
With the some of these assessments where you could say I'm married to somebody who's extremely extroverted. Yes. Like off the charts extroverted. And then I have to be extroverted for my work. And I am a little bit social, but I'm not so social like to the degree that it actually lines up with what I expend in the course of a day. So at the end of every day, I do need a recovery period. And when I was burning out in my corporate career, that's kind of where that was just constantly being depleted beyond my capability to recover from it. And that's how you end up kind of just, you have nothing left to give, right? You hit that bottom and you don't have the resilience that you need to keep going forward. So it's really more, I am more, to answer your question, Deepa, yes, I am a little bit more introverted.
See, I learned something new about you today. So in that moment, when we went back to when you were kind of like in the corporate world and everything, did you actually go talk to someone, or did you do, like you yourself said, more like a self-introspection work because that's just what works for you? At
that time, actually, I really credit my chiropractor at the time.
Chiropractor.
My wise fatherly figure, because that was the only thing I was doing to take care of myself at the time. And obviously my stress was getting stored physically. I was having physical issues as a result of that. And he never said, you should do this or you're on the wrong path. He just asked questions. That's all he did. So patiently asking questions, telling some stories that might inspire the questioning. And I didn't know what he was doing at the time. I knew I was extremely unhappy in my situation and I needed to change it. I didn't know what and how I would go about doing that, which is why I'm so willing to help people through their transitions today, because I didn't necessarily have all the support I needed at the time. And I would rather people avoid some of the mistakes or the amount of time it took me to realize it.
Yeah.
But now that I've had that experience, I can be able to impart that. So I'm very grateful that I am the person that I am today, having gone through what I went through, because it really enables me to have the empathy for those that are going through it today, and to hopefully help them through that journey to get to the other side.
Absolutely. And you've been that person for me in so many ways, and more like a mentor. Whenever I'm like, Karen, can you talk to me about this? And you have tons of questions, which brings me to the questions. Do you remember what are some of the questions your chiropractor asked you? I'm so curious. Because I was like, what did he clearly saw something that was happening physiologically in your body, and he could see that you're unhappy.
It's going back like 13 years now, but let me...
Yeah, sorry. I was just
No,
what did he say?
He was a presence in my life that didn't exist anywhere else. And so somebody who, as he's adjusting me, telling me stories of when he was wandering around as a young man and trying to figure out his life, I didn't realize at the time he was really using himself as an analogy, as different as we were. So just having this thematic journey, just these stories around journey, was something that just planted these little seeds that grew over time, that really, again, started to help me to start to question my situation. Right? I didn't have the wherewithal at the time. I repeated this earlier, and it's like, oh, what's the gap between where you are and where you want to be? All I knew was that this is not working.
Right. You had enough awareness to really at least be true to yourself and say, this is not working for me right now.
He never hit me over the head with anything. He never ever did.
Yeah.
It was more like, just as you working on, telling stories. And it just opened up my eyes to just different paths. That's all he needed to plant, was there's the different paths that are out.
Yeah. You had enough self-awareness, and you were open, and he asked the right questions. He was in the right place at the right time, and the way he did it too was very subtle. He talked about his own life, and that really sort of connected with you. And then you started thinking about what he was saying, probably at a very subconscious level.
That's right. Yeah, it was amazing. We encounter people, and people encounter us in our paths. We just have to be paying attention and recognizing what's happening when it's happening. And maybe I have lifelong relationships, but there are people that come in and out of each other's lives, but they serve a specific purpose. And it's just being able to leverage and be aware of what's going on, what's coming from that. That's really the true gift in life.
I completely agree with you 100%. There's so many people in my life, including you, that I feel have just been it's like the right people, the right moment, the right situation, the right context. And if you're open enough to listen to it, then you can actually hear the things that are not being said or said, right?
It's paying attention again. Honestly.
Yes, totally. I'm going to shift just slightly a little bit, because I do want to ask you about this question around women and C-suite level. It's just been such a hot topic for the last few years. And there's so much, last few years, great work was going on around diversity, equity, inclusion. This year, it's taking a little bit of a hit, and everybody's talking about it, how funding is not there. All of these things are sort of going away. What is your take on all of this?
A lot of this is coming from a place of not understanding. Not understanding what DEI is, not understanding other people and their experiences, not having the curiosity and the empathy to try to understand. That's why I said it's gotten very polarizing politically. And so there's a whole lot of debate. There's not a whole lot of dialogue around it. And I think there are some very vocal voices that have platforms and people that listen to them without having the critical thinking behind of, where is this coming from? What does this mean? What is it that we all want? But it's very reductive thinking, right? It's the throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've been doing this work for the entirety of my career. Like in any field of practice, it's not perfect. There are challenges, and there are people that maybe lack capability and who make mistakes like we all do. And then there's no understanding. And so rather than saying, how can we make this work, that positive framing, there's get rid of it altogether. DEI must die. Like that was actually a hashtag, right? So I think it's coming from a place of not seeking to understand.
And what is it that they need to understand? If you were to say that in a few sentences, or if you were to give us an example.
I think it's different for every person. They probably have been shaped by their experiences. There's plenty of data. That's the thing. There's so much data about why it's good for everybody. And if somebody wants to believe something, you can put all the proof in front of them. They're still not going to believe it, right? Because they don't want to. So it's not my job to convince them, but it's for us to find what is it that we all want. Everyone wants peace and harmony, you would think. Right?
I don't know about that.
But you see also behind all of this is that judgment piece. This is good or bad, right or wrong. And no one's seeking to understand. No one's trying to take it up a level. It's gotten very base behaviors, right? The fight or flight, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I think there's certainly people that are going to continue the work, and I need to be there for them. The work that I have is around sustainable DEI. How do we make sure we ensure progress that sticks? Because I think some of that is bringing up some of the cynicism is because there are some failures in that space. And how do we make sure we sustain progress over time so that people can see the benefit of it?
Yeah.
But they're shaped by their experiences, and the curiosity isn't there. Where is this coming from, right?
Right. And so let's just say, and to your point, that some people are going to continue to work in it in the coaching consulting space, and some employers or some organizations will continue to keep pushing it because there's value in it. It is a business imperative. It is about fairness. It's about giving equal opportunity to everybody, right? So what if I'm like a leader in a very big organization and I'm having a real struggle in implementing some of the DEI initiatives that I kind of thought were really good for the company. And now I'm getting a lot of pushback, and I love this company, but I'm also not happy with the culture of the company, and I come to you. How can you help me with this?
Yeah, I that's my sweet spot. So luckily, and having seen this field evolve over the decades, is that there are different specialties within it. And so if you're coming to me, it's because you want to take a look at how culture is either driving or not driving that. I would say also stay tuned because I'm working on how to integrate business goals with culture goals, with DEI goals, so that they're woven together for strength, right? Like a rope. Oftentimes, DEI sometimes is treated as an add-on. So, I want to do this special initiative or I want to drive this project. And they don't get sustained because they don't either get to the depth, breadth, or momentum that you need to be sustainable. There's sources of resistance when it comes to DEI work, like there is in any change, by the way. And understanding where those sources of resistance are coming from will drive your approach and your response to it. So that's why in the work that I do in the consulting space is about making sure that there's a baseline of what the current state is so that we understand on deep level, like beyond superficial or beyond what an individual leader thinks is the version of the truth, is to be able to take the deep dive in the organization to understand what's really driving the current cultures and what is it that we want to maintain versus change, right? And understand in what order of priority, by the way. So it's a little bit like the analogy I give is like a GPS. How can you get the directions if you don't know where you are and where you're going? So you might have a vision of what you want in the future, but maybe you haven't spent the time to understand where you are today, because those are the levers you have to pull in order to take that journey to that future. And if you don't know what what is the least amount of work that's going to have the biggest impact, then you're kind of throwing things at the wall and hoping that it sticks.
So one of the things that you'll have me do if I came to you for coaching would be to like really sort of explore and understand whether my business goals, culture goals, and DI goals are all integrated, or if I'm just doing DI as an add-on. And the second thing is you'll help me explore within the company, like where are like the, what was the word that you used? Restrictions, or where are some of the
sources of resistance? Yeah,
that I'm seeing. So that would that be one of the things that we'd explore?
Well, that's tied to readiness of the organization, and I would do that in the capacity as a consultant. If I'm coaching a leader on DEI, that's about kind of exploring what role or how do they perceive and what role do they want to have when it comes to DEI. That's a very personal, that's why it's in a coaching situation, especially if they're executive leaders. I would be coaching them on a one-on-one basis. The consulting piece is, what are we doing organizationally on teams? What capabilities do we want people? So my framework, design of work experience, is a great approach to addressing DEI amongst any other types of experiences to be had at work. DEI is just one application space for it, because that creates it's a co-design model that combines design and change processes with engagement and capability. So bringing those together is what's going to more likely bring about that meaningful change people are hoping for.
Okay, so it would be, if I really wanted to address like the bigger issue of the company, then you would come in as a consultant and possibly do your design of work experience or co-design, which is your book. And then, or if I came to you individually as a coach and I said, well, guess what? Nothing in my company is going to change, but within my sphere of influence, what can I change? Then that could be more of a coaching conversation as opposed to a whole culture and company conversation.
You know, I'm a big believer that, and people don't feel that it's accessible to them, but like one person changing really will have ripple effects. And if they find one other person to carry the flag with them, that's going to have an exponential impact, and then et cetera, et cetera. It'll build from there. You don't have to feel completely powerless or a victim of your own situation. There's always something you can do. And everyone's aim is to have better communities at work. And this is meant to be able to drive some of that. So I really think that there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And I never approach the same situation the same way, because the people are different and the context is different.
Right.
So that's really the important piece. And when we talk about aligning DEI with the strategy of the company, are we aligned with the business strategy in the first place, right? There's a lot of prerequisites to it. So every situation is a little bit different. And it's my job to be able to come in, ask the right questions, understand the current situation, and to be able to illuminate the path by which that people, the leaders, and the organization can become the best version of themselves.
Got it. And of course, it takes a lot of work and commitment and people enough to be able to say, we would like to make some changes. Yes, some of the culture stuff that we have is kind of icky, doesn't make sense, and we need to address it.
Yeah, because what happens if you don't?
Yes. I mean, we've seen that.
So there's this whole thing, it's the vitamin versus the painkiller argument. But if you want to differentiate your company, you want to be more competitive, then you take steps like this to make yourselves a better organization.
Did you say, I'm sorry, did I hear you right? Say why women versus the painkiller argument?
Oh, yes. So in Silicon Valley, in the startup world, it's like, that's actually one of the ways in which they measure some of these new ideas that come forward. Yeah, so when they try to assess a new offering to the market, is this a vitamin or a painkiller? Is often asked.
I heard it as why women. I was like, vitamin? Okay, vitamin. I was like, what is happening today? I'm like, is this some nonsense DI thing that I haven't heard of?
No, not at all.
Okay, why vitamin as opposed to... Oh, okay, now I get it. I'm so glad I asked you the question, because I would have just skated over it thinking this was something that...
No, ask anything, anytime. By all means, please.
Okay, so what are in your space, whether it's like DI or leaders or culture or any of these things, what do you think are the three most important things that a leader needs to have or cultivate in order to manage people, and why? And can you share a story if you have one for us?
I just I just published or it's coming to press, 3 super capabilities that leaders need to have. And they're super capabilities because you need to kind of build up to it through other capabilities in order to be able to leverage it. So those 3 are strategic follow through, um, change, leadership, and partnership. So I'll give you the example of strategic follow through. Have you ever had? I've had this, so I'll speak to my own experience. I've had managers that were so big picture strategy thinkers that they couldn't execute their way out of the box. And then I had the opposite. I had managers that were so good at execution, but they couldn't see the forest through the trees. Those are both really important skills, but it's about kind of bringing them together so that you have strategic follow through. And I'll tell you why it's so important. It shows up in everything. These 3 show up in everything. And that's why I think if you say, what are the 3? I know you probably picked 3 out of a hat, but it just so happened I had these 3 super capabilities top of mind. It's like, I'll give you an example of how pervasive it is. You can talk about strategic follow through at a very high level executive leadership standpoint, but I personally feel like this whole thing about return to work, we can't do hybrid. You have to come to the office. That all comes from perhaps managers' inability on the strategic follow through to be able to see people and the moving parts. And so they're struggling with managing remote workforces. And that's why they're asking for you to come back to the office. It's one thing to be a strategic thinker, but it's another thing to act and to behave with that strategic thinking. And that's why I talk about strategic follow through as being a really important super capability, because to be able to just think about how unstoppable you could be to be able to bring those 2 together. Change leadership, that's any aspect of leadership. Everything is about taking us from where we are to where we want to go. So to be able to shepherd and facilitate change on a constant basis, that's absolutely critical. And then that partnership, that's the relationship building, the ability to build coalitions, to collaborate, to bring people together, to inspire them to do amazing things together. So those 3, and you need those in a VUCA world, you need those in great times, and you need them in really troubling times as well. And so those are the 3 things that I really think that we should focus on building as a capability in leadership. But I don't know if you noticed, the more senior people get, the less development work that they do.
Well, they know everything, Karen. They know everything because they're high up there. So that means, they're successful. So they're good at what they do.
So I used to do this thing where in those big talks with CEOs, whenever I had enough of my extroversion saved up to ask a question, is to say to them, you've achieved the pinnacle of your career. What would you like to learn from here? And I can tell you a majority of them could not answer the question.
Yeah, then that tells us a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw there's Edelman does this trust, annual report on trust. And what they noticed is that people actually don't listen to their senior leaders as much as they do other sources of information. That's a big wake-up call for leaders, because there's that saying that your title only gets you so far.
It's clearly the strategic follow-through, change leadership, and partnership leadership super capabilities that they need to consistently show that'll get them further out. I can't wait for this article to come out. Can you send it to us so we can put it in the show notes?
It's going to be in a book. It's part of a book series. I've been talking about it because I just feel so strongly about it. I've been doing presentations on how to prepare the company for the next crises, and I fold this into it as well. There's a working group I'm co-leading with one of my client companies, and this is an industry working group on how to codify what it takes to lead other working groups, because it's in healthcare. That's how things change in healthcare. And so how do we bring in these 3 super capabilities? Because again, if you have these, they're like superpowers. They're going to help make great things happen.
Awesome. And then I have 2 final questions for you as we're kind of wrapping up. You have a LinkedIn course already on LinkedIn, and you have a couple more coming. Can you share that with us, or do you have to wait?
No, I'm happy to share. So my LinkedIn courses are in the DEI channel, but the way I've envisioned them is that there are leadership courses that happen to focus on DEI. I feel very strongly about all of it, honestly. But if you take those courses, I hope that you walk away as a stronger leader as well. So the first course that is available currently is about sustainable DEI. So being able to affect change at the individual, team, and organization levels. And then the next 2 courses, which should be coming out later this year, one is about integrating business culture and DEI goals. And the other is about how to start or restart DEI from scratch. So that's, I think a lot of organizations have a need to explore that, and they might not know where to start. These courses are not meant to be, they're only tops, right, an hour-ish. Or they can be as short as half an hour, 45 minutes. I don't know what mine will turn out to be, but they're intended to just help you get started on that journey.
Got it. Wait, I can't wait to get to see these 2 courses out, especially the restart DEI one, because then I can hand it over to, some of my clients. I'm like, why don't you just take this course and get some fundamental understanding?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
right.
You learn through these courses, you can lead any change. That's really,
Yeah. Excellent. Final question for you. What is your recipe for 2024, recipe for life for 2024?
So I felt myself a bit tapped at the end of last year. I purposely left visioning work for this year to this year. One of the things I started to net out was like last year, given all the challenges, the theme was maintain. And it was a lot to even maintain last year. And this year it's about momentum. Recipe for life, I would say not only for 2024 and beyond, but it's like it is meant for beyond as well, as just kind of finding your, now Lori in Leadership Revolution calls it your internal compass. For me, it's this broad, what is the basis by which you derive your meaning out of your life? So if it's a faith, or if it's a spirituality, or if it's your values, is using that as the basis by which you do everything else. That's one. Certainly the relationships with those around you. We can't do it alone, okay? As much as we might feel alone, there's always somebody that can help. And we do need other people. And then love, really, like this empathy and love and care and concern for other people is going to make such a big difference, because right now, our world feels really dangerous, doesn't it? And there needs to be more people doing good than bad to combat that. And that's why every little piece of good you can put out into the world, you just do it, because it's got that ripple effect, and we need more of that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And then finally, keep learning. Right.
Keep learning.
Yes.
On that note, Karen, thank you so much for coming on the show and being such an amazing guest. I had so much fun chatting with you, and I can't wait to see how this all pans out this year for you with all this momentum and good going on.
You and me both. Thank you. Always great to talk with you. I'm so glad we could do this. Thank you for having me.
Hey, this is Deepa again. I hope you really enjoyed my show today. Thank you so much for listening to our conversation. If you'd love to get in touch with me or my guest, or would like the show notes, resources, or links, please reach out to me on my website. I would also love your feedback. Until next time.